Morning, everyone. Brett Rice with Core Vision Financial Group. Today, I'm joined by Andrea Lee as we discuss the top financial questions and answers for women investors. So recently, Andrea and I have been having some communications about, what did we want to, talk to people about in 2021? And one of Andrea's main focuses, one of the things she really wanted to drill down into is, asking a group of women what were their top financial questions and what were their financial concerns and what, just in general, how involved are they in the finances and what questions about those financial decisions, do they have to help, increase their financial literacy and help them become, if they're not currently active in their personal finance, help them get more comfortable with being involved in that. So, Andrea, real quick, do you want to get us started a little bit? Talk about how you collected this information, who you reached out to, any of that information. Just give demographics here.
Yeah. Well, I first want to kind of start and just talk about why I wanted to do this, because I think I want to do this for a long time. I'm really excited about this whole month and everything that we're pushing out, because I feel like there's some really good content that's coming out this month, specifically focusing on women investors and not just boring finance that is not going to be fun. Like everything I've read up to this point, I've really enjoyed, and I think most people would. I don't think it's just me, because I am interested in this. But when I became an advisor, I noticed pretty early on in sitting in the meetings that the majority, not all, but the majority of the appointments that I sat in, the male spouse would tend to drive the conversation, and the female, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, in the majority of those appointments, she would sit back, and if the advisor asked her opinion on things, then she would speak up, but otherwise didn't typically talk much. And being honest, that's probably more so how it was in my household growing up. And I think early in my marriage, it was also like that with my husband and I, which is kind of funny because it's not necessarily the roles that we are comfortable with, but it was kind of like that's how it was supposed to be. And so we both tried to put ourselves into roles that weren't comfortable because we felt like that was, what we're supposed to do. So then in sitting into those meetings, it just kind of started I noticed it. And then of course it bothered me because I was like, no, I like finance and I think I'm pretty good for the most part at finance. So I don't feel like I couldn't be just because I'm a girl. And it made me want to figure out why. And then of course, if I think that it shouldn't be that way, then I want to change it. So I thought about, it was around 20, I don't know exactly how many I got back, but it was around 20 women that were either just women that I felt like were pretty strong, because I did know that sitting into appointments, they were very forthcoming with how they felt about things, which I love, or they were strong influences in my life growing up, just different ladies that I know from all different age groups. And so I asked them a group of questions, and we're going to kind of go over what their answers were, and then some of the questions that I asked were for them to give me questions, and so we'll talk about those and those answers. But the first question that I asked was, what's your first memory of money? And I promised all of them that I would keep that completely confidential, so I will not share any of their stories, but I will share with you mine. And growing up, my grandmother used to babysit for me, and so all of her errands, no matter what they were, I was always kind of her little tag along. And I knew that whenever I went to the grocery store with my mom, we'd get to the toy aisle, and I would always, notoriously, and my children do it now, I wanted something because it's always low on the shelf so that it's at my eye level, and whatever it was, my mom would always say, well, we don't have the money for that. So, fine, that I could understand. But whenever I would go with my grandma, she would always let me get something. And so I just felt like my grandparents were just completely loaded because they could afford, those tiny little toys at the grocery store. And it's funny, obviously, to me now, but I cherish those memories. Both my grandparents have passed, and it's cute to me that I have that memory. So.
And that's a shout out to Tyrone Gross. He's a guy who I heard on a podcast one day talking about, getting people to open up about their first memory of money. And I've thought about that. Andrea and I had that discussion, but that's something, I first heard him talking about, that it's like, you take that and you can help relate that to, a lot of people's relationship with money is going all the way back to their first
right, because some of them were positive and some of them were negative.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely.
It's a very personal relationship, right? So a lot of that they're established very early on in people's lives. So, and they carry on. Even though your financial situations may change, everything, it doesn't really change your relationship with money a whole lot. All right, well, that's great, Andrea. So I'm very excited, to be participating in this and being able to talk about this with Andrea, because some of these topics you get into, and it opens up a whole conversation about these topics, about people's, we talk about people's relationship with money, their investment experience, all of these things, and it just, to me, this is what Andrea calls nerding out, where we start getting into these conversations and you get really excited and you get passionate about it and you want to talk about it. So I'm very excited to be participating in this.
Yes, since you are male.
So we're going to get into the questions here. So the question here we're going to start off with is what is your largest financial fear? And this is a question that Andrea posed to her group here, and she got back a whole bunch of different answers, so which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, so I wasn't necessarily surprised by any of them. I think they're all very common fears that we hear as advisors. To be honest, whether they're male or female clients, I think that these are very common. So those kind of were related to, having enough money to support their families or themselves, not saving enough for retirement or for college to be able to provide that for their children. And then, nursing care, long-term care, those types of things, really taking everything that they had saved and going towards that instead of, being gifted to their children or whatever else they might have wanted to do with it. But that wasn't necessarily what they saved hard for, was to just give it away to a nursing home. So those were, the majority of the responses that I got. And ironically, I think most of the answers, are pretty similar. No matter which one of those fears they have, I feel like we can almost diminish those fears a little bit with the same answer. And so first and foremost, getting a plan in place, speak with a financial professional. Obviously I'm going to be a little biased. I'm a CFP. I think that's the way to go because that's what I do. So I think getting that plan in place so that you know where you are, right? So especially if you're trying to save for those long-term goals like retirement and college, you got to know where you're starting from, in order to get on track to go where you want to go. So I think first and foremost, get with your financial professional, get a plan started, and that doesn't have to be a huge, robust plan. Don't be scared of that, but just get some stuff on paper. As far as supporting yourself and your family, again, if you get with that professional, they can help you with current ratios. So you're going to know if you've got enough liquidity currently to cover your expenses for the next year. And, those are all just some basic math to figure out where you're sitting currently. So those ratios, savings rates, are you saving enough given your employer match if you have one to be on track for those long-term goals? And emergency funds, kind of going back to making sure that you've got enough liquidity in the event that life happens, because inevitably at some point you're gonna get thrown some curveballs. It happens. And so when those things happen, if you've got that emergency fund in place, they're not that scary, right? Because you were prepared for that. And then spending ratios, again, we kind of, I feel like as a gender, get the stereotype of spending quite a bit. So just kind of making sure that your portion of your money that should be going to housing is going that way, and it's, whatever proportion is supposed to go to food. And those are all, there are all norms, I guess, and we have all these tools that tell us kind of what those should be in order to be in a safe spot with your finances. So just finding that professional to help you figure out where you are in those ratios, and then if you need to adjust them, helping you do that.
I think we're gonna beat this drum a few times as we go through this, when we start talking about creating a financial plan. And as Andrea touched on, it's not a huge comprehensive plan. These things are built in steps. Getting it written down on paper, creating a budget, understanding what your assets and liabilities are, where you have blind spots. That's when you sit down and talk with your financial professional and you start saying, how can some of these other tools play into that to help me be more secure in my financial future? Whether a health issue comes up or whatever, a windfall, or any of these other items come in, you kind of have this plan laid out, and then once one of those things happens, you're like, okay, that goes in this area. So we're going to beat that drum a bunch of times today, talking about getting something written down. We think a formal plan with projections and all of this stuff is the way to go, obviously, because that gives us a roadmap to do it. But getting those started, a budget, just understanding where all your money is being spent, where your revenue is coming in from, just understanding all of those things, so then you can expect the unexpected, right? Because like Andrea talked about, we talked about appliances are going to fail. You're going to have flat tires. You're going to have all of these expenses come up that aren't going to be on a set schedule, but they are going to happen. We all experience them. So I think that's a benefit of that coming up. So
right. I think too, one thing that makes planning maybe not so scary is I think any good planner is going to utilize software, and that software, like our particular situation, you're able to have your own login, so you're able to log in and see things as life happens and market fluctuations occur and whatever those may be. You're able to see how that affects your plan and how you're working toward those goals and how close you get and all those things. So that's really nice to have with the software. But the other thing that it does is it takes things into account, like inflation. So just saving for what current expenses are isn't going to be enough, right? We've got to do, over time, that inflation is going to make things more expensive, and things tend to inflate at different rates. So healthcare and college expenses tend to inflate a little bit quicker than goods, and so with that software we're able to do that. And then luckily, the computer can calculate all of those things quite quickly, so that you're able to see what things would look like in 20 or 30 years, right? Because though I think you and I could do it, we're going to do it a lot slower. So that's handy. It takes into account, we can run insurance analysis to see if that's something that you need, whether it's long-term care or just life, all of those things. How you tolerate risk and how comfortable you are with that. Like, we have all these metrics and tools at our disposal to just really help you put that plan in place that's specific for you, because when you answer all the questions, then the rest of it starts to become pretty easy, because once you've answered everything, then it lays it out. This is what we need to do. And so it's I just don't want anyone to be scared of creating a plan, because it really is a tool to help you get accomplished what you want to do.
And from my personal experience has been that when you build this plan, you get a realization of whether, my preconceived ideas, whether they're, reality or not.
Right.
A lot of people say, I need to save $1 million. Well, are you on track to that? Are you even saving enough to come close to that?
And is that even going to be enough? Because with inflation, and maybe you're a big spender, $1 million may not be enough.
Right.
But that's why we utilize software.
Yeah, and some people's lifestyles may not require $1 million.
Right.
Because there's, a lot of people come in preconceived, notions that you're going to tell me I've got to save every penny that I can, when in actuality, you're looking at the plan, there are just so many options and so many different things that can come out of the plan that, a lot of people think that a financial plan is going to, handcuff them to this plan to where they cannot change it, they can't spend any money, they can't go on vacation, and all of that's just not true. So, a lot of times you just got to take your current lifestyle into account, and then you build your plan around that. I mean, these are your goals.
Right.
So we're using what you tell us to create these goals. So if it's a priority, you need to make that happen. We're just going to help you write down, give you the plan, and then periodically, whether it's once a year, twice a year, whatever, get together and say, hey, are we still on this track? Did we put these things in place in the order we said we were going to in order to secure your financial future?
Well, and you touched on something too that I thought was really good. The earlier that you get started and focused on this, the better. So, Brett touched on not wanting to have to pull back the reins so tight. Well, the earlier you get started, the less those odds are having to do that because you started early. And so really that's, time is your friend in this whole scale of things. And so the more time you have to save, the less that has to hurt, right? So if anything, you should want to get started sooner rather than later for that reason.
Someone else that's also a friend is Jason Pike. Right? Because one of the things he tells us all the time is that the one thing you can't make more of is time. Right? So getting started in your 20s as opposed to, waiting until you're in your 40s to get started gives you such an advantage that it gives you more options, right? Because you've gotten started earlier. Now you would theoretically have 40 years from your mid-20s to 65 to save for retirement, to allow for compounding, right? Because the longer your money has to compound, the more it's going to grow. That's historically been the way that works.
And if you're in your 40s, that doesn't mean there's no hope. You
Right.
need to start now too. Point being, start now. Because today is better than tomorrow is better than next year.
Right, absolutely. And it's a lot of times people say, I got to get my budget in order and stuff. But that's all part of it.
Right.
It's part of the process. It's part of the planning. It's understanding all of that stuff. And understanding that wherever you're at today is just where you're at. We're not going to change that. What we want to do then is how do you still, achieve your goals no matter where you're at on that journey. So.
Right.
Super exciting stuff. Andrea and I love to talk about this stuff. We talk about it all the time. So it's great. So it's just interesting, to sit here and talk about it and do a video of it. And, talk about the results of the survey that Andrea did and everything. It's just super great information. We wanted to make sure we shared it. It's, probably going to be a couple of videos because there's just so much information, so many answers to all these questions that Andrea got back, that it's like each one of them, there's, approximately 20 answers. Some questions were, they kind of common 4 answers, but other ones, there's, a dozen different answers to the question because everybody's situation is different.
Right.
And each one of them, there's no cookie cutter, easy answer for every situation.